The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the red rope barriers. Among them stood Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old travel blogger from Chicago who had saved for 2 years to make this dream trip to London. She clutched her expensive camera, determined to capture the perfect shot of the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Sarah had read every travel guide about this moment. She knew the guards in their tall black hats and red uniforms would march with perfect precision. She knew thousands of people came here every day hoping to witness this centuries-old tradition. But what she didn't know was that today would change her life forever. The crowd pressed forward as the ceremony began. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders while elderly couples strained to see over younger visitors. Everyone wanted the best view, the perfect photo, the memory they could treasure forever. Sarah found herself squeezed between a German family, with 3 young children and a group of teenagers from Japan who kept taking selfies. As the guards began their march, Sarah noticed something the guidebooks hadn't mentioned. One particular guard caught her attention. He was different from the others somehow. While his uniform was identical and his posture just as straight, there was something in his eyes when he briefly glanced toward the crowd that seemed almost human, almost warm despite the stern tradition that demanded he remain stone-faced and unmovable. This guard, whose name tag read Williams, had been performing this duty for over 8 years. He had seen thousands of tourists come and go. He had witnessed marriage proposals, children's first steps, and emotional reunions. He had learned to remain perfectly still even when people tried to make him laugh, when they waved frantically, or when they pushed against the barriers trying to get closer. But today felt different to him too. Perhaps it was the crisp autumn air or the particularly enthusiastic crowd. Or maybe it was the woman with the camera who seemed so focused, so determined to capture something special. He had noticed her the moment she arrived, not because she was particularly loud or disruptive like some tourists, but because of her quiet intensity. Sarah raised her camera as the guards approached the area where she stood. The light was perfect. The angle was exactly what she had envisioned. This would be the shot that would make her travel blog famous, the image that would capture the majesty and tradition of British royalty. She had waited her entire adult life for this moment. But as she stepped forward to get a better angle, her foot crossed the red rope barrier. It happened so quickly that she didn't even realize her mistake at first. She was completely absorbed in adjusting her camera settings, making sure the focus was sharp, checking the lighting one more time. Guard Williams saw her step across the line immediately. His training kicked in, and he knew exactly what protocol demanded. The barriers were sacred. They represented centuries of tradition, respect for the monarchy, and the safety of both the guards and the public. No exceptions were ever made, regardless of the reason or the person's intentions. The other tourists around Sarah began to notice what had happened. Some pointed, others whispered. A few pulled out their phones, sensing that something unusual was about to unfold. The German family's children tugged on their father's sleeve, asking in loud whispers what was happening. The Japanese teenagers stopped taking selfies and focused their cameras on the developing situation. Sarah finally looked up from her camera and realized where she was standing. Her heart sank as she saw the red rope behind her and felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. She had broken the most basic rule of royal protocol, and she had done it in front of hundreds of witnesses and at least one very serious-looking royal guard. Guard Williams began walking toward her with measured, deliberate steps. His expression remained completely neutral, giving no hint of what he was thinking or what he planned to do. The crowd fell silent, creating a tension so thick it seemed to echo off the palace walls. Sarah's mind raced as she watched him approach. She had read stories about tourists being arrested, fined, or banned from royal properties for much smaller infractions. Some had been escorted away by police, their vacations ruined, and their reputations tarnished. She thought about her blog, her reputation, and the money she had spent on this trip that might all be wasted because of one careless moment. The guard stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see her own reflection in the polished buttons of his uniform. Time seemed to freeze as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Would she be arrested? Would she be publicly humiliated? Would this become one of those viral videos that people share when they want to show what not to do when visiting royal landmarks? Sarah opened her mouth to apologize, to explain that she hadn't meant any disrespect, that she was just a tourist trying to take a photo. But before she could speak, something completely unexpected happened that no one in the crowd could have predicted. Guard Williams looked directly into Sarah's eyes, and instead of speaking the harsh words everyone expected, he quietly said, "Miss, you seem to have dropped something." His voice was gentle, almost kind, completely different from the stern authority everyone had anticipated. Sarah looked down, confused. She hadn't dropped anything. Her camera was secure around her neck, her purse was zipped shut across her shoulder, and her phone was safely in her pocket. She looked back up at the guard with bewilderment clearly written across her face. Without breaking his professional posture, Guard Williams reached into his jacket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He handed it to Sarah with the same careful precision he used for every movement during the ceremony. The crowd watched in stunned silence as this formal exchange took place, not understanding what they were witnessing. Sarah took the paper with trembling hands. As she unfolded it, she discovered it wasn't an official warning or citation as she had feared. Instead, written in neat handwriting were the words, "The best photo opportunity will be in exactly 3 minutes when we turn toward the east gate. Move to your right behind the tall gentleman in the blue coat. The lighting will be perfect for your camera settings." She looked up at Guard Williams in amazement. How did he know what camera settings she was using? How did he know she was trying to get the perfect shot? And most importantly, why was he helping her instead of having her removed from the area? The guard gave her the slightest nod, so subtle that only she could see it, then turned and walked back to his position. The crowd, still not understanding what had just happened, began to murmur among themselves. Some were disappointed that there hadn't been more drama. Others were curious about what had been written on the paper. Sarah quickly stepped back behind the rope barrier and moved to the spot the guard had suggested. She positioned herself behind the tall man in the blue coat, just as instructed. As she waited, she noticed that Guard Williams occasionally glanced in her direction, not obviously, but just enough to make sure she was ready. Exactly 3 minutes later, the guards began their turn toward the east gate. The morning sun hit their uniforms at the perfect angle, creating a golden glow that made the red fabric seem to shimmer. The tall black hats cast dramatic shadows and the polished brass buttons gleamed like jewels. It was absolutely breathtaking. Sarah raised her camera and began shooting. Every photo was better than the last. The lighting was indeed perfect. The angle was spectacular, and she was capturing images that would be the envy of every travel photographer. She had never taken better pictures in her life. But as she continued photographing, she began to notice something else remarkable. Guard Williams wasn't just helping her get good photos. He was subtly adjusting his position and timing to make sure she had the best possible shots. When another guard blocked her view, Williams shifted slightly to open up the angle. When a child in the crowd started crying and causing a distraction, he held his pose a few seconds longer so she could get her shot during a quieter moment. The other tourists began to notice that something special was happening, though they couldn't quite figure out what. Some started taking pictures of Sarah taking pictures, sensing that they were witnessing something unusual. The German family's father began pointing out to his children how professional Sarah looked with her camera, using her as an example of how to properly observe the ceremony. As the ceremony continued, Sarah realized that Guard Williams was conducting a masterclass in photography assistance while maintaining his official duties perfectly. Every movement he made served both the ceremony's requirements and her need for exceptional photographs. It was like watching a choreographed dance between tradition and creativity. She also began to understand something deeper about this guard. He wasn't just following orders or performing a job. He genuinely cared about the experience people had when they visited this historic place. Despite the strict rules about remaining stoic and unmovable, he had found a way to make her visit special without compromising his responsibilities. The ceremony reached its climax as the guards formed their final formation. Sarah captured every moment, every detail, every expression. Her memory card was filling up with once-in-a-lifetime shots that she knew would define her career as a travel blogger. These weren't just tourist photos, they were artistic masterpieces that captured both the grandeur of the tradition and the human spirit behind it. As the ceremony concluded and the guards began to march away, Guard Williams passed by Sarah's position one final time. This time, he spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "Check your camera's memory card when you get back to your hotel. The last photo might surprise you." Sarah was puzzled by this comment but didn't have time to ask what he meant. The guards were moving away. The crowd was beginning to disperse, and her once-in-a-lifetime photo opportunity was coming to an end. She waved goodbye to the spot where Guard Williams had been standing, though he was now too far away to see her gesture. The other tourists began to leave, chatting excitedly about what they had witnessed. The German family approached Sarah and complimented her on her professional photography skills. The Japanese teenagers asked if she was a famous photographer and requested selfies with her. Everyone seemed to sense that something special had happened, even if they couldn't quite explain what it was. But Sarah knew her story was far from over. The guard's final comment about checking her memory card intrigued her, and she had a feeling that the most surprising part of her London adventure was yet to come. Back at her small hotel room in Bloomsbury, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the morning's events. She had experienced something truly unique at Buckingham Palace, but Guard Williams's final comment about her memory card kept echoing in her mind. She decided to upload her photos immediately to see what he could have possibly meant. As the images transferred from her camera to her laptop, Sarah was amazed by their quality. Each photograph was better than she had hoped. The lighting, the composition, the timing, everything was perfect. These photos would definitely make her travel blog stand out from the thousands of other London travel posts online. She scrolled through image after image, each one bringing back memories of that magical morning. There was the shot of the guards, in perfect formation, the one capturing the intensity in their eyes and several artistic close-ups of their uniforms and ceremonial weapons. Every photo told a story of tradition, discipline, and British heritage. Then she reached the final photo on her memory card, and her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a photo she had taken. The image showed her standing behind the rope barrier, camera raised with a look of pure concentration on her face. But what made this photo extraordinary was that it had been taken from Guard Williams' perspective, showing the ceremony from his point of view. Somehow, he had managed to take a photograph with her own camera without her noticing. The technical skill required to do this while maintaining his ceremonial duties was incredible, but the artistic eye that had composed the shot was even more impressive. The photo captured not just her image, but the entire crowd's fascination with the ceremony, the majesty of the palace in the background, and the perfect golden morning light. At the bottom right corner of the photo, she noticed something else that made her heart skip a beat. There was a small watermark that read, C. J. Williams Photography. This wasn't just a guard who had helped her take better photos. This was a professional photographer. Sarah immediately opened her laptop's internet browser and searched for J. Williams Photography London. What she discovered completely changed her understanding of the morning's events. James Williams was not just any royal guard. He was one of London's most sought-after wedding and portrait photographers, who had been featured in several prestigious photography magazines. His website showed a portfolio of stunning work that ranged from intimate family portraits to grand wedding celebrations. His artistic eye was evident in every image, and his ability to capture emotion and story in a single frame was remarkable. Sarah realized she had been helped by someone whose photography skills far exceeded her own. But what puzzled her even more was why someone of his caliber was working as a royal guard. As she read through his biography on the website, the pieces began to come together. James had joined the Royal Guard 7 years ago as a way to support his photography business. During its early years, the steady income and flexible schedule had allowed him to build his reputation and client base gradually. However, what had started as a temporary job had become something much more meaningful to him. He had discovered that he genuinely loved being part of the royal tradition and connecting with the thousands of visitors who came to witness the ceremonies. He had found a way to combine his artistic passion with his service to the crown and his desire to make people's visits special. Sarah scrolled through more of his work and found a section titled Moments of Joy. It was filled with candid photographs he had somehow managed to take during various royal ceremonies, always showing visitors experiencing moments of wonder, excitement, and pure happiness. There were children's faces lighting up with delight, elderly couples holding hands while watching their first ceremony, and tourists from around the world sharing in the magic of British tradition. She realized that she had become part of his collection. Her photo was among dozens of others that captured the human side of these formal ceremonies. But unlike the others, hers came with a story of personal connection and artistic collaboration that made it special. As she continued reading, Sarah discovered something that made her decision easy. James donated a portion of his photography profits to a charity that helped disadvantaged children experience cultural events and travel opportunities they otherwise couldn't afford. He was using his dual career to not only create beautiful art, but also to give back to his community. Sarah picked up her phone and found the contact information on his website. Her hands were slightly shaking as she composed a text message. She had never been bold enough to reach out to a stranger like this, but something about the morning's experience had given her courage she didn't know she possessed. "Hello, James," she wrote. "I'm the American tourist with the camera from this morning's ceremony. Thank you for the incredible help and the surprise photo. I'm a travel blogger and I'd love to feature your story and your photography in my next post. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee to discuss this? I'm in London for 3 more days. Sarah Mitchell." She stared at the message for several minutes before finally pressing send. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed with a reply that made her smile. "Hello, Sarah. I was hoping you'd reach out. I'd love to meet and hear about your blog. How about tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m.? There's a lovely cafe near Westminster Bridge that has great natural light for photography discussions. James." Sarah couldn't believe how quickly her London trip had transformed from a simple vacation into what felt like the beginning of a meaningful connection. She had come to London to capture the perfect photograph, but instead, she had found something much more valuable. A story that was still being written. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah looked once more at the surprise photograph James had taken. In it, she could see not just her own excitement and focus, but also the reflection of something special happening. Tomorrow's coffee meeting would reveal just how special it could become. The cafe near Westminster Bridge was exactly as James had described, filled with natural light and bustling with the energy of London life. Sarah arrived a few minutes early, choosing a table by the window where she could watch the Thames flow while she waited. She had spent the entire morning preparing questions for what she thought would be a straightforward interview about his unique dual career. When James walked through the cafe door, Sarah almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the formal red uniform and tall black hat, replaced by casual jeans, a comfortable sweater, and a warm smile that transformed his entire appearance. He carried a weathered leather camera bag that looked like it had traveled the world, and his whole demeanor was relaxed and approachable. "Sarah?" he asked as he approached her table. "I have to say, you look much calmer than you did yesterday morning when you realized where you were standing." His eyes twinkled with gentle humor as he sat down across from her. They both laughed, and Sarah felt the nervousness she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to melt away. "I still can't believe I did that," she admitted, "and I definitely can't believe how you handled it. That was the kindest way anyone could have managed that situation." James ordered tea while Sarah chose coffee, and as they waited for their drinks, he explained his philosophy about his role as a royal guard. "Most people think our job is just about following protocol and looking impressive in uniform," he said. "But I've always believed it's really about being guardians of people's experiences. Yes, we protect tradition and maintain order, but we're also responsible for helping create memories that people will treasure forever." Sarah pulled out her notebook, ready to conduct a proper interview, but James gently stopped her. "Before we talk about my story, I'd love to hear about yours. What brought you to London? What made you decide to become a travel blogger? And what was so important about getting that perfect photograph?" This wasn't what Sarah had expected, but she found herself opening up to James in a way she rarely did with strangers. She told him about her corporate job in Chicago that left her feeling empty. about her dream of traveling the world and sharing stories that would inspire others to explore beyond their comfort zones. She explained how she had been saving money for 2 years to make this trip possible, and how much pressure she had put on herself to create content that would justify the expense. The photograph wasn't just about my blog, she admitted. It was about proving to myself that I could do something meaningful with my life, that I could create something beautiful and share it with the world. James listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he understood the deeper motivation behind her journey. When their drinks arrived, he shared his own story with equal openness. He had started photography during university, but family financial pressures had forced him to find steady employment immediately after graduation. The Royal Guard position had seemed like a temporary solution, but over the years it had become much more than just a job. It had taught him discipline, attention to detail, and most importantly, how to find extraordinary moments within ordinary routines. Every day I get to watch people experience something special, James explained. Children seeing the palace for the first time, elderly couples fulfilling lifelong dreams, families creating memories together. It made me realize that photography isn't just about technical skill or artistic vision. It's about recognizing and preserving the moments that matter to people. As they talked, Sarah began to understand that their meeting was about much more than a simple interview. They were both people who had found ways to pursue their passions while navigating practical realities. They both understood the importance of creating meaningful experiences for others, whether through travel writing or through photography. James pulled out his phone and showed Sarah some of his recent work. There were stunning wedding photographs, intimate family portraits, and candid shots from various royal ceremonies. But what impressed Sarah most was how every image told a story. Each photograph captured not just what people looked like, but who they were and how they felt in that moment. "This is incredible work," Sarah said genuinely. "Why haven't you left the Guard to focus on photography full-time?" James paused, considering his answer carefully. "I've thought about it many times," he admitted. "But there's something special about the combination. The Guard work keeps me grounded and connected to real people's experiences. It reminds me that photography isn't about impressing other photographers or winning awards. It's about creating images that mean something to the people who matter most, the ones living the moments I capture." Sarah felt a deep connection to this philosophy. Her travel blog had started with similar intentions, but somewhere along the way she had become focused on metrics and competition, rather than the genuine desire to inspire others to explore the world. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah asked. "Meeting you yesterday and hearing your story today has reminded me why I started blogging in the first place. It wasn't about building a following or making money. It was about sharing the magic of travel with people who might not otherwise experience it." James smiled and raised his teacup in a toast. "To remembering why we do what we love," he said, as they continued talking. They discovered they had similar views on many things beyond just their careers. They both loved exploring hidden corners of cities, finding local stories that tourists usually missed, and believing that meaningful connections with people were more valuable than perfect Instagram posts. The afternoon flew by as they shared stories, showed each other their work, and found themselves laughing more than either had expected. Other cafe customers came and went, but Sarah and James remained at their table by the window, completely absorbed in their conversation. As the sun began to set over the Thames, casting golden light through the cafe windows, James looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I have a proposition for you," he said, "but it might sound a bit crazy." Sarah leaned forward, intrigued by the mysterious tone in James's voice. "I'm listening," she said, setting down her coffee cup and giving him her full attention. "Tomorrow is my day off from Guard duties," James began, "and I've been planning a photography walk through some of London's hidden gems, places that most tourists never see, but that tell the real story of this city. I was going to go alone, but after hearing about your blog and your approach to travel writing, I think you'd bring a completely different perspective to the experience." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "What if we collaborated? You could write about the experience from a traveler's point of view, and I could provide the local insights and photograph the journey. We could create something together that neither of us could produce alone. A true insider's guide to London that goes beyond the typical tourist attractions. Sarah's heart began racing with excitement. This was exactly the kind of unique content she had dreamed of creating but had never known how to access. "That sounds amazing," she said, "but what's the crazy part?" James grinned. "The crazy part is that I want to show you London the way I see it, as both a local and as someone who spends his days watching tourists. We'd start at 5 a.m. to catch the sunrise over the city from a rooftop that requires some creative climbing. Then we'd visit a market that only operates before 7 a.m., where the vendors have been selling the same goods for 3 generations. After that, there's a hidden garden behind a seemingly abandoned building, an underground tunnel system that most Londoners don't even know exists, and a few other stops that might require us to bend some minor rules." Sarah's eyes widened. This wasn't just a walking tour. It was an adventure that could result in content unlike anything in her portfolio. But it was also potentially risky, and she was supposed to be a responsible adult on a solo trip to a foreign country. "I can see you weighing the pros and cons," James said with understanding. "Let me sweeten the deal. If you agree to this adventure, I'll not only provide the photography and local knowledge, but I'll also help you create a multimedia presentation that combines your writing with my images. We could submit it to travel magazines, photography journals, or even create an exhibition. This could be a career-defining project for both of us." The offer was incredibly tempting, but Sarah had learned to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. "Why are you offering this to me?" she asked directly. "You're clearly an established photographer with your own successful business. What do you get out of collaborating with a travel blogger you just met?" James's expression became more serious, and Sarah could tell he was being completely honest with her. "Because in all my years of photographing people and watching tourists experience London, I've never met anyone who approached it with your combination of genuine curiosity and artistic integrity. Most travel bloggers I encounter are focused on getting the shot that will generate the most likes or shares. But yesterday, when I watched you preparing for that photograph, I could see that you were trying to capture something real and meaningful." He continued, "I've been wanting to create a project that shows the deeper side of London, but I needed someone who could tell the stories behind the images. Someone who understands that the most beautiful places aren't always the most famous ones, and that the best experiences come from genuine connections with people and places." Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest as she realized that James saw something in her work that she had sometimes doubted herself. "There's something else," she admitted. "I've been struggling lately with feeling like my content is becoming too superficial, too focused on what I think people want to see rather than what genuinely moves me. This collaboration could help me remember what travel writing is really about." James nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We could create something that inspires people to travel more thoughtfully, to look for the stories and connections that make a place truly special, rather than just checking famous locations off a list." They spent the next hour planning their adventure, with James sketching a rough map on napkins and Sarah taking notes about potential article angles. The more they discussed the project, the more excited they both became. This wasn't just about creating content, it was about rediscovering their passion for their respective crafts through collaboration. "There's one more thing," James said as they prepared to leave the cafe. "This adventure will require a fair amount of trust between us. Some of the places I want to show you are ones I've never shared with anyone else. They're personal to me, and I'll be trusting you to write about them in a way that respects their significance." Sarah understood the weight of what he was saying. "And I'll be trusting you to keep me safe, while we explore places that aren't exactly on the official tourist map," she replied. "I think we're both taking a leap of faith here." James extended his hand for a handshake that felt more like a pact between artistic collaborators. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners," Sarah agreed, shaking his hand firmly. As they walked out of the cafe together, both of them felt the excitement of embarking on something that could change their careers and possibly their lives. The evening air was crisp, and the lights of London were beginning to twinkle across the city that held so many secrets they were about to discover together. "Meet me tomorrow at Tower Bridge at 4:45 a.m. James said as they parted ways. Bring your camera, comfortable walking shoes, and prepare for the most unique day you've ever had in London. Sarah walked back to her hotel with her mind racing, already beginning to compose the opening paragraphs of what she hoped would be the most important article of her career. She had come to London looking for the perfect photograph, but instead, she had found the perfect story, one that was still unfolding with each passing moment. At exactly 4:45 a.m., Sarah found James waiting by Tower Bridge, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and wearing the confident smile of someone about to share something extraordinary. The city was just beginning to wake up, with only a few early commuters and delivery trucks moving through the quiet streets. Ready for the adventure of a lifetime? He asked, handing her one of the coffees. Their first stop was indeed the rooftop he had mentioned, accessed through an old office building where James knew a security guard who owed him a favor. As they climbed the narrow stairs in semi-darkness, Sarah's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. But when they emerged onto the rooftop just as the sun began to rise over London, she understood why James had insisted on this early start. The view was breathtaking. They could see all of London spread out below them, with the Thames winding through the city like a silver ribbon. The morning light painted everything in golden hues, and the famous landmarks looked completely different from this unique perspective. Sarah took notes and photographs while James captured her reactions and the stunning sunrise simultaneously. "This is where I come when I need to remember why I love this city," James explained as they watched London come to life below them. "It reminds me that there's always more to discover, even in a place I see every day." Their next stop was the hidden market James had mentioned, tucked away in an alley that Sarah would have walked past without noticing. The vendors were indeed multi-generational families who had been selling fresh flowers, vintage books, and handmade crafts in this location since the 1940s. James introduced Sarah to several of the vendors, and she was amazed by the stories they shared about London's history and changes over the decades. One elderly woman named Mrs. Henley, who sold antique jewelry from a small wooden stall, told Sarah about how this market had survived World War II bombing, urban development, and countless other changes. "The secret," she said with a knowing wink, "is that we're not trying to be the biggest or the most famous. We're just trying to be the most genuine." Sarah realized that Mrs. Henley's philosophy perfectly captured what she and James were trying to achieve with their collaboration. They weren't trying to compete with other travel content creators or photographers. They were trying to create something authentic that would genuinely help people connect with London in a meaningful way. The hidden garden behind the seemingly abandoned building was perhaps the most magical stop of their adventure. James led Sarah through what appeared to be a broken gate into what looked like a vacant lot. But beyond a cluster of overgrown bushes, they discovered a secret garden that had been lovingly maintained by local residents for over 30 years. The garden contained plants from around the world, each one planted by someone who had moved to London from another country and wanted to bring a piece of their homeland with them. There were roses from Bulgaria, herbs from Morocco, fruit trees from India, and flowers from dozens of other nations. It was like discovering a living museum of London's multicultural heritage. "This represents the real London to me," James explained, as he photographed Sarah walking among the international plants. "It's not just about British tradition, though that's important too. It's about how this city has become home to people from everywhere, and how they've all contributed something beautiful to make it what it is today." Their exploration of the underground tunnel system was perhaps the most adventurous part of the day. James had discovered these tunnels during his photography walks and had learned from local historians that they were part of London's Victorian-era infrastructure. Walking through them felt like traveling back in time, and Sarah's imagination ran wild with stories of the people who had built and used these passages over the centuries. As the day continued, Sarah realized that something profound was happening beyond just collecting material for an article. She was experiencing London in a way that was changing her entire perspective on travel. Instead of rushing from one famous site to another, she was taking time to understand the layers of history, culture, and human connection that made this city truly special. James was experiencing something similar. Through Sarah's questions and reactions, He was seeing his own city through fresh eyes. Her curiosity and thoughtful observations were helping him discover new aspects of places he thought he knew completely. By late afternoon, they had filled Sarah's notebook with stories, and James's camera with hundreds of images that captured not just the hidden locations but the joy of discovery itself. As they sat in a small pub that James had chosen as their final stop, both of them exhausted but exhilarated, they began planning how to turn their adventure into the multimedia presentation James had promised. "I think we've created something special here," Sarah said, flipping through her notes. "This isn't just about showing people secret places in London. It's about demonstrating a different approach to travel altogether." James nodded enthusiastically. "We've proven that the best experiences come from connecting with local people who are passionate about their city, and from being open to unexpected adventures." As they worked together to outline their project, Sarah realized that her relationship with James had evolved beyond a simple collaboration. They had become true creative partners, each bringing out the best in the other's work. More than that, they had developed a friendship based on shared values and mutual respect for each other's talents. "I have a confession," James said as they prepared to leave the pub. "When I helped you with your photographs yesterday, I wasn't just being kind to a tourist. I recognized something in your approach that reminded me of why I fell in love with photography in the first place. I was hoping we'd have a chance to work together." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the pub's cozy atmosphere. "I have a confession too," she replied. "This has been the best day I've had since I started travel blogging. You've reminded me that the goal isn't to impress people with how many places I've been or how professional my photos look. It's to share experiences that might inspire others to discover something beautiful about the world and about themselves." 3 months later, their collaborative article and photo series was featured in 3 major travel magazines, won 2 photography awards, and inspired dozens of other travelers to seek out authentic, connection-based experiences, rather than simply checking famous locations off their lists. But more importantly for Sarah and James, their partnership had blossomed into something neither had expected when they first met at Buckingham Palace. Sarah had extended her stay in London indefinitely, working as a freelance travel writer while building a new kind of travel content that focused on cultural connections and hidden stories. James had taken a leave of absence from his guard duties to focus on collaborative photography projects that combined his artistic vision with meaningful storytelling. Together, they had created Hidden London Tours, a unique service that offered small groups the same kind of authentic exploration they had experienced on that first adventurous day. Their waiting list grew longer each month as word spread about their approach to showing visitors the real heart of the city. But perhaps the most significant change was personal. What had started as a professional collaboration had grown into a deep friendship built on shared creative passion, mutual respect, and a love for discovering beauty in unexpected places. They had found in each other not just creative partners, but kindred spirits who understood that the most meaningful journeys weren't about reaching destinations, but about the connections made along the way. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Sarah and James returned to Buckingham Palace to watch the changing of the guard ceremony. This time Sarah stayed safely behind the rope barrier, but she carried with her a much greater treasure than any photograph could have been. She had discovered that sometimes the most wonderful adventures begin with a simple mistake, and that the most unexpected encounters can change the entire direction of your life. As they watched the ceremony together, both of them smiled, remembering how a moment of tourist clumsiness had led to the most meaningful collaboration and friendship of their lives. The guard who had replaced James in the ceremony maintained the same stoic professionalism, but Sarah and James knew from experience that behind that formal exterior was a person with dreams, passions, and the capacity for unexpected kindness. Their story had become proof that meaningful connections can happen anywhere, at any time, between any two people who are open to seeing the humanity in each other. What had started with a woman disregarding royal guard instructions had become a testament to the power of compassion, creativity, and the courage to take unexpected chances on the people who cross our paths. Years later, whenever Sarah told the ITV story of how she met her best friend and business partner, she would always end by saying, "Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is making a mistake in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, in front of exactly the right person." And James would always add, and sometimes the most important part of following protocol is knowing when to break it in the kindest way possible.